And we are back. And at this time, I'd like to focus on the champion select, understand what Astralis can do to bring it back. This is only a game out of 5 in favor of JDXL. What can we expect from the Stars?
I mean, I think this first draft that we had out of them was more or less, it ended up kind of being skill checky, right? And I think JDXL were very happy to kind of take a lot of these skill matchups. I don't necessarily feel like they failed these skill matchups, though, right? The game was very slow paced. I think what actually ended up influencing a lot of these matchups ended up just being, Dan being able to finally get a dive working on the bottom side. Tax did a good job of denying that very early on.
Mhm.
If we end up seeing another draft very similar to this, I would like to just see Astralis simply be a little more clinical or give themselves earlier options to look to try and attack or try and punish Venger and FGG for their slightly early over aggressive egregiousness towards the bottom side. But I just felt like in the first game, they weren't really able to do that. From draft, I feel like if they go into it again, it's just about actually slightly changing the game plan and how they approach it as opposed to the actual draft itself.
Astralis
Yeah.
went and took the blue side trouble. So, what is in your mind? I know there's something cooking there, so tell me.
So here's the thing. I feel like Astralis looked so freaking hot in the previous best of series. I felt like every single lane was very put together. They all played extremely aggressively, and suddenly they're playing against Excel and they're shut back into their shell. I would like to see bot lane play more aggressive in their own right. I feel like Nami and Lucian in the hands of Crispek and Kiba can be very potent. And if you don't think you can match the aggression because Dan is paying too much attention down the bot lane, pick something roaming for Kiba. He's one of the highest roaming supports that we have over in the NLC. Give him something like the Nautilus, like the Leona, allow him to roam the map, and then you can get Senkax ahead much earlier on in the game, and then he can dictate the pace of how you want to play these fights in the river.
So you're about to jump into pick and ban. I don't know how you guys are at home, so tell me who do you think is going to win between JDXL and Astralis? JDXL last run at Aurora Open or even at the NLC as they announced, so they're doing a good job ever since Summer Split. They went on that default Dune, they were just slipping, but out of a sudden they just came back stronger on the Aurora Open for everybody to see. Let's see how they're going to land on this one on the pick and ban. I'm just waiting to understand if we're ready to go or not. But Jamada, from the top side, you saw the Atrox, you saw the Yone. I know you're a connoisseur of both of them. Was that the way the matchup should have went?
Yeah, I think more or less it was Carson doing his job in that matchup. He was up CS.
Hmm.
You can definitely find some all-in windows a lot more frequently than I feel like was pressured. But in a comp game, you're not always necessarily going to be balls to the walls looking for those options every single time you had them. And definitely feel like Astralis, I think it was around 15-ish minutes into the game. I think it might have been a bit earlier actually, but actually looked to try and leverage some of that strength when a bad trade was taken by Cries. We're finally hearing to pick some bans. If the matchup is played again, however, I would like to see a little more aggressiveness out of Carson's side of things. I think he can definitely actually look to really play up in Cries' face in a matchup like that and try and take it to him. He was very close to, in my opinion, really stomping the matchup, but I think was maybe a little bit too timid to try and take the lead in that.
So I would, okay, even though I would like to see Carlsen take it on to Cries, I think specifically because the Stars are playing blue side, I'd like to see a mega aggressive bot lane and Carlsen on a low resource champion. Something like the Sejuani, the Maokai, or the Ornn, any of the three. He showed that he can play the set actually pretty well on the top side of the map without resources. He showed that he can play something like the Wen on the top side of the map if they need more AP damage with low resources. So anything that can be tanky-ish, that can engage a fight, of course Sejuani is out. Straight into my mind comes Maokai and Ornn.
Where's the Dinger, by the way? Because the last time we've seen that on FGG, it was a beast, so I don't think JDXL are going to take that away, which means Aatrox, Dinger, even Silas, everything is going to be open.
Yeah, it's very interesting that they decided to trade out that Heimerdinger ban for the Draven this time around. I'm wondering what's prompted that, but Astralis, as things stand, have the opportunity to just go towards that Nami again for the first pick so they can aim up for that Lucian in the response. It's more about how JDXL are going to look at this and whether or not they're going to actually just respond the exact same way, because there wasn't really an issue with it, to be honest with you. And if the Graves does go through here for Dan, I agree with you, Trouble, to be honest. Then I want to see what Taxa actually has in response. Do you just go towards the Viego again? Are you going to actually try and get things done a little bit earlier? Will you draft a different set of solo lanes to try and compensate that? You love the hover from Dan just to try and poke a little bit of fun at him. But yeah, I mean, you can just go towards your support here again, rerun it. right? There was nothing really wrong with it. It's on Astralis. The urgency is on them to actually try and find a response.
I've seen
I
this
agree.
trouble.
No, I agree 100%. I think XL is like, we played our game. We destroyed you in the early. We can do it again. We have to change absolutely nothing. It's Astralis right now that are in pressure to say, if we do run it back, if they do a Fnatic salty run back, you know, of the previous playoffs, they need to. I feel like they need to change something right here, because the Lucian's gonna get locked in. Maybe get a more proactive jungler. Maybe get something like the Maokai alongside the Nami and Lucian. Maybe get something that will create a lot more room around this duo, or that will gank a lot more. Something like the Trundle, if you will. Something like the the Maokai, which yes, inevitably they will fall behind towards the Graves. Or if you want to, and you feel like you want to, you can play the Kindred, but I feel like this is most likely going to be a Viego lock-in.
Kindred would actually be a pretty good call here, but I feel like Tax is just not really the kind of player that wants to pull it out unless it's, you know, perfect conditions for the pick. And yeah, we just get the Samira lock-in. I don't think anyone is too surprised. It's a Zoe run back for now.
A Caliban?
Oh, actually, I suppose. Actually, the Aatrox was locked in here.
Yeah,
so it was actually Samira that came in fourth. So now this JDXL swapping the priority up a little bit. I beg your pardon. It gives Astralis the opportunity now to more or less pin down that champion pool. For JDXL, I don't know whether or not I like this adaptation, but we'll see how it actually ends up turning out, because Astralis now have a little more fluidity in terms of what they want to remove away from the solo laners.
I feel like it's a really good ban to ban the Akali first here, because Fiora or Camille are not going to be a problem for you. It is blue side for Astralis. You're going to get to see what the top lane is going to be, and you can actually leave Christ for last. So right here, you can even blind pick your Silas if you want to, who doesn't necessarily have way too many hard matchups into him. And then, I think that
the idea here.
The banning the Lissandra away, that shows that you want to play a melee champion. I don't even know if that's going to be something maybe like a Yasuo or a Yone coming out of Mroscoe right here, but I feel like locking in the Silas, allowing the counter pick to go over to Kryze, because right here you haven't banned Camille's, you haven't banned Fiora's, you haven't banned any of this, but on the other hand, Carlson cannot necessarily blind pick them. I'm thinking maybe something like even a Gnar for Carlson wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, wouldn't be too bad. Has a lot of his favorite options up. Astralis, though, they read the room, so Silas is gone. And now, like you say, Trouble, you know, those Morozku champions kind of lean into those Yasuo Yones. You would then have to rely on Christ to pull out a little bit of magic damage. But if Astralis don't draft any frontline, it don't really matter that much in terms of the damage profile. So we'll see what exactly Morozku wants to lean on, because those two bans indicate that it's going to be mid on R4. And it's actually just going to be the Ari. So we don't see it too much these days. I'm sure Nightmare is rubbing his hands together. We'll see what Senkux is going to answer this one with. As you know, that traditional Lissandra answer is gone. You still have things like the Azir if you want something very safe scaling. Something like the Swain, honestly, I think is a fairly good answer into it a lot of the time. And again, it's one of those picks that creates a lot of space, like you're saying with the Maokai. Buys a lot of space for Lucian. Swain does the exact same thing. So I love this pick when you come to look towards those team fights.
Do it. Do it.
Is that the Ornhorn?
Do it. That is the
Ornhorn. Okay, there you go.
Okay, I like the nav because, of course, it's a blind pick. We talked about it before as well. I think it's the safest option together with the Ornn, but provides a little bit more damage as well, right? Because if you have the Lucian as a soul damage dealer in your team, that can become a little bit tricky, especially since Swain goes a little bit more utility-based to try and provide that space, but also provides a lot of setup for ganks. I think it is so important when you're playing the Viego to actually have some setup in lanes for ganks. You have that with the Lucian Nami down in the bottom with the slows and the bubble. Now you have that in the mid lane as well, and Kryze locking in that Aurelia. I think this is the perfect opportunity for Senkux to showcase his prowess in lane, shoving that wave, roam up top lane, absolutely destroy that Aurelia early on.
Any predictions before we toss it to the game? Gemma, who you think is going to win on this one?
I mean, I'm really liking JDXL's comp just for the sake of, again, they've gone towards more skill expression in the top side matchup this time around, the Irelia. It's Carlson, by the way, on the opposite side of this. This is somebody that's very familiar with the pick, so he's really throwing down the gauntlet for our, our young junior top laner here, Kryze. We'll see how he gets on. I think Astralis, it's the same kind of similar draft from game number one in my eyes. Just a little less skill expression. It's just more about team fighting, right? This time around, those big team fighting tools. So I think, again, early on, not too many tools. I want to see them try this time to actually get themselves into that full 15 to 20 minute mark even, so they can use these team fighting tools now instead.
So you
love
believe
this.
it's going for GDXL? Trouble, you agree with that one?
No, I think
You think
Astralis have
Astralis?
got a
Okay.
very Astralis-esque draft. I think Senkax was absolutely fantastic at creating space and using his advantage in team fights. And of course, you can't create too much space with the Akali because you're playing more an assassin role. But right here on the Swain, he can absolutely shine. That Samir dives in, Asolvens are overextending so many fights in game one. You take him out of the picture straight away. How does the Graves walk into a Swain such short range? You're gonna get burst out by the Lucian and the Nami. So I'm really loving what Astralis have if they can, like Jamata said, stabilize it through the early game so that the Nard does not get absolutely destroyed by Aurelia. I think they've got pretty good hands in the neutral objective fights.
One believes in Astralis, the other one go for GDXL, but we're going to go to the casters and Nightmare. Is that a book or is that an Oblivion Orb? I can't quite see.
It's a Putrefier.
Oh, it's a Putrefier.
Ah, yeah.
I think what you'll find is me getting increasingly more annoyed at these suggestions, but it is, of course, the Ari on the Rift, and I'll be tracking that itemization across it. But Middlecop, we're back for game 2.
Yeah, woohoo! Another game of League of Legends. Who could have predicted it?
Good skin choice,
Yeah.
Spirit Blossom Ari. It ranks up in like the top 2 my Ari skin tier list. So you know we're starting off with a good start, but on slightly more tangible things, which may apply to more people than just me, in my opinions, on various aesthetics about my favorite champion. I really like what Astralis have done with this draft. We were actually chatting a little bit midway through draft. After the first 3 picks, I was like, oh gosh, this is not very good. I believe I used the words were...
not poggers.
It was not very poggers, yeah. It got significantly better after that point, though. I think that Astralis, seeing that it was heading towards, again, another very short-range draft, Swain loves that sort of identity. Mininar as well can also do very well in side lane against both of these champions if you don't fall too far behind. I know that the Aurelia is a counter matchup if they get ahead, but the Gnar, on the whole, will have team fight ability, and then also the ability to still have some kiting prowess, even in the smaller form. So there's that. There's the Swain. The rest of it, of course, the same for Astralis. But for me, I really think that Astralis have some windows of opportunity to try and take down JDXL.
Yeah, and I'll be hoping to utilize them. Last game, we did see both junglers start on the top side of the map. This time, JDXL getting down at that early red buff as FGG is diving full, but CRISPR can respond with a fair bit of damage themselves. So how do you feel like the way that Dan is pathing is going to impact this game? It may be impacting Senkux, but no, the Graves just walking through, going to defend his topside jungle.
Yeah. So this is very much the RNG style of mid-jungle. We saw this a lot from Wei and Zhao, who won similar champions to this, actually, although they'd rather play stuff like the Vi, which can be a huge engage carry. But if you start splitting the map, it does leave mid lane in a bit of an awkward spot, because if you ever end up pushing up, contesting that wave, and as Trouble was suggesting, try and push in that wave as the Swain. Yeah, very early on with an early red buff, you can actually start forcing flashes. You can actually force Swain a little bit further behind. While actually as a response to this, Senkux actually says, okay, I'm not going to push the wave, but that does mean that you are safer in terms of your individual level, but you're not pushing in the wave. So you've lost the ability to shove and roam early on and respond to plays.
Yeah, and now because of that early red steal, there is basically nothing for Taxa to clear in his own jungle. This is a extended trade in the mid lane, but Mrozki missing the charm means there's no real kill threat available. But now the Viego, after clearing those clugs, is in a position where there's not really much that he can do on the map.
Yeah, and Mrozki's got the early shove on the Ahri so far. And again, a lot of that is because of how Dan chose to invade, then walk across that mid lane. It's something, again, that we've seen some of the very best teams in the world do across this year. RNG, one of those. But, of course, it is Dan who has ended up on bot side first. Stacked wave, this will be pushing out. If they look for an all-in, Dan is right around the corner. Maybe Astralis can be baited in by half-health FGG, but not just yet. Instead, it's going to be a tussle over the bottom scuttle.
Taxa being forced back here. Mrozki does have the first move away from the mid lane, so that's scuttle number 1 going in favor of the JDXL jungler. Venza is incredibly low on the bot side here. You need to be careful.
Yeah, you can see that there was a flash used by Chrisberg, a heal used by Kiba, and all in.
Ooh.
I can deduce from that using my great deductive powers. Venza is out of potions. Not sure exactly. Can we just go back down to that bot wave again very quickly? Actually, we'll see what's happening in this mid lane first. But yeah, you can see it's even wave. Not going to be losing too much, and Kiba not able to stop that recall. So Venza able to get out of dodge on that one just about.
And so as we look towards this sort of top lane, this was probably one of the quieter lanes, but it's looking a bit more interesting in the early stages this time around as Taxa does secure the stun onto Kryze, but not really the damage to follow up to pressure the JDXL top laner further away. And this was a bit more of a neutralizing matchup, I feel like you were mentioning in the previous game, where Cries was just sort of there to prevent the Yone win condition from Carlson
Yeah.
coming online. This time the Gnar, a bit more of a champion that doesn't need to snowball as much.
No, because the Gnar is going to have insane teamfight impact, regardless of how far ahead or behind they are, actually. Because it's just Gnar. Get a good enough Gnar. Things go a bit crazy. We're actually going to get a replay of what happened in this bot site. With FGG looking for that all-in. Of course, when Samira stacks up that passive, you get a lot of move speed towards enemy champions, so you have a lot of ability in early levels, even without your ultimate, to start chasing down. Cries dashing forward, going to be dashing back towards those minions in the way that Aurelia so effortlessly does. Ari had the roam towards that top side, but was walking over a reward, so Carlson forced to disengage from that play himself, even though he's had the early shove. And it's going to be, again, a little while before we get ourselves a first blood.
And I tell you what, once again, we're seeing Suncook's having the sort of lion's share of the CS here in the mid lane. Has already built up quite a substantial lead over the Ari.
Yeah, Morosky missed out on a couple of those CS. Ari versus Swain, it's a bit of an awkward matchup because it does feel as though if you don't take very heavy trades early levels, you start falling behind. Of course, with the way that the jungle invade worked, it did mean that Morosky had a bit of helping hand in that sense, but if you ever get hit by one never move, you get a little bit out-traded at that point, particularly because the double instance of damage from that Swain E does just get so very annoying. But we'll have to track that as it goes on. Of course, Morosky not picking up something like an Ignite, which you really need to try and solo kill that matchup. Yeah. Typically, though, that's a pretty difficult ordeal anyway for Swain versus, for Ari versus the Swain, rather. So just going towards that TP, allowing themselves a bit more ability to reset, keep your lane in a good spot. And he's going to get caught by that E again. Senkirk's on point in this laning phase.
It's very efficient trading coming out from the veteran mid-laner, and Mozq, once again, not really having the better end of things. Dan playing with fire a little bit, clearing out that ward, but Kiba not able to lock him down. Once again, it's aggression, it's moves being made by both junglers across the maps, and leads being established within lanes, but nothing explosive thus far. Yeah,
but remember, it did explode in just one huge play eventually from JDXL. Bot lane dive, that really set things off to a good standard for them. Astralis' bot lane had a difficult game. And a lot of that was because of how Dan pathed towards bot side. I would really look towards this bot lane, this Lucian Nami, now that they are in a better position to have a stronger performance in this game. So you're not going to have to deal with Chrisberg going 1-5, not able to impact that game.
Hello.
It's going to be mid-jungle Charmland.
And Taxa has to flash away. No ultimate available to get over the wall. That's brilliant proactive stuff from JDXL's mid-jungle duo. Taxa can still get that red buff, but with the blast cone, JDXL get out of there quick as a...
Okay, so it is just going to be the flash blind from Taxa. So that is, as far as things go for Astralis, one of the better outcomes in that situation. But one of the things that we noticed about last game, so we'll actually have to wait. This is actually a solo kill opportunity. All up from Cries, fully stacked on the passive.
Carlson charging up the rage, about to go mega, and obviously getting access to a bit more HP, a bit more of those tank stats means that the all-in potential from the Irelia is reduced, and I love this from Taxa, helping out his bot lane, recognizing that the Lucian Nami is something that you can play
has
towards.
flash up now. This could be an engage
as well, going forward, but doesn't quite land the engage onto Chrisberg. We'll be forced to waddle away in the dismounted form.
Yeah, it doesn't get the stun midway through the jump to pin Chrisberg in place for the crash down, but that's going to be flash once again blown from FGG. Use that pretty much every opportunity he can do onto Chrisberg. And Chrisberg at least has had more of a stable early end this time. Hasn't died early several times, and that's a good sign for Astralis. They locked in again the Lucian and the Nami. They're actually haven't found a win on it at the Aurora Open so far. They are 0-2 on it, including that last game, but this is a much better start from it. It means that they're not having to deal with, again, just bleeding out through that bot side.
And I tell you what, we're talking about them not finding a W on the Lucian Nami. JDXL haven't found an L this entire Aurora Open, continuing their unbeaten run with the first game in this series, and even State still have the potential to keep that run going.
And that's actually really impressive. Again, considering how JDXL summer went into that EU Masters performance, finding themselves without a loss so far, trying to find themselves a team fight victory. Ult cast from Cries.
Yeah, this is a little bit aggressive from JDXL. They don't have all their members here just yet. The Irelia can still go forward, as does Dan. Carlson in the mini form doesn't have the angriness to get mega just yet, but Astralis get the Herald and get out.
And actually, while this is happening too, Venza roamed up towards mid lane, so it's actually Chrisberg left alone in bot side. So Astralis get themselves Herald. They get out with blowing basically nothing. They blow themselves a heal from the Nami, I suppose, but that's about it. JDXL trying to now capitalize on something on this top side. Still have members up here, but they are matched by Astralis type for type.
Probably don't go for a dive here.
Just about. Not without the Aurelia ult, certainly. It's much harder to do without that Vanguard's Edge firing things off. But while we're saying that, that's a big win for Astralis. They did get that first Herald the last game. They did get that through strong laning performances in the game 1. But in this time, it has been more of a contest around that Herald. They walk out with it all the same. And now JDXL really looking towards where they're going to find their first victory at this point. Because I think if they go even into this mid game, they're a little bit worried. I don't think it's unplayable or anything. But when you're dealing with a Swain that very much deals with stuff like your Aurelia, your Graves, your Samira, who are doing damage from within his zone of absolute crazy damage and control from his ultimate, you don't realistically want to be taking even fights there. So watch out again for what FGG and Dan are going to be doing across the map. That was a huge part of how they snowballed ahead in that last game to make sure that they're not worrying about those even fights.
Yeah, and once again, it's a very early Umbral Glaive coming through from Dan. The vision denial that item offers you, as well as the actually fairly efficient damage that you can get out of it, means that whenever it's in a state that anyone can build it, they pretty much always opt towards it.
Yes. Very much. Do you remember Serpent's Fang when it was like that too? That was a fun item to build. Less fun for FG and Venza in the bot lane. 3v2 briefly. Dan's on his way.
Yeah, still only level 5, now ticking over to level 6, getting access to that ultimate, and JDXL could look to turn it around, but this is a 4v3. So much damage comes out, and now the resets can come through for Venza. An explosion takes out FGG, but here comes Mrozq, and Senkux forced to flash away. It's a bad play for Astralis in the bot lane. JDXL come out on top.
Considering how that looked at the start of it, brief 3v2 for Astralis, you would have been very much in your right mind to think that JDXL will walk away with a losing play. Kreis has minions to dance through, misses the ult.
We have the flash from Carlson, just about to go mega, hopping forward, chasing down Kreis under the tower, but doesn't quite get the hyper stacks. So close to a solo kill, but not coming through.
Kreis looking to get through onto the minions potentially, queuing forwards, but misses the stun.
The stun under the tower, thrown into the wall, the tower shot! The boulder interrupted by the minions. A game of inches in the top lane, but FGG's here to even it up. He's in the top side of the rift, and Kreis will take out Carlson.
What, and somehow it ends up being a solo kill. The Attract Repel cast onto Kreis, but no damage registered. Close run things in the solo lanes, and Kreis, much like that first game, taking an awkward situation without resources being thrown up towards his lane, being very much on the weak side of the map, but coming away better off than you would expect. Kreis with a kill, somehow walks away with a victory.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. And it's been better from Astralis, honestly, so far in this game. They've been going for plays that are millimeters away from working, but it's still JDXL who have gained a minor gold advantage themselves and were able to take the first dragon. This Herald, though, will knock down bot lane tower, and injecting some gold onto Chrisberg, onto this Lucian, not a bad thing at all.
And you do have the flash from FGG in case they do want to engage.
Yeah, turning onto him as the tidal wave is blocked by Venza. Turret does fall as Taxa is here, and it's actually Astralis that have got a 4v3 in the bot side. FGG still going forward, the Vision of Empire used. Venza chunking out with some damage. Senkux here, uses the ultimate, but low on mana. It's not going to matter, though. FGG is dead, and Astralis get the tower, too.
Yeah, when Senkux pops that ult, you are just in such a difficult spot. Meganar being charged up from Carlson. Round 2 fights.
Wallop available. Ults Kreis into the wall, misses the stun. The Defiant Dance will keep Kreis alive for a little bit longer. The house goes wide. But I'm not sure it's going to matter. Kreis incredibly low. No reset on that Blade Surge just yet. And Carlson wants payback for the event of a few minutes ago. Kreis still kiting around, though. Not quite hit by the boomerang, but one more auto surely will pick him up. Surely Kreis can't get out of this one. Carlson turns it around and gets the solo kill.
Whenever you see Aurelia near the minion wave, you just have to question it. Kreis doesn't win the play this time, though. Walks into the minion up, even with the level advantage at the start of that play. Does not walk away with the kill. Carlson, this guy has evolved so much over the course of this year. Astralis' top laner gets himself a W in the 1v1.
Absolutely massive, and that has brought the gold right into the advantage for Astralis, who with a composition that functions incredibly well at this point in the game. The Swain, the Lucian Nami coming online as well. If they can look for more of these skirmishes, it could cause massive problems for JDXL.
Yeah, and something has already become a massive problem, Middlecott.
Oh no.
I've got some sad news to report. Mrozq has indeed built Neverfrost, which is sadly Not a good item. I'm not exactly a fan of this one. Those of you that don't know, quite opinionated about what you should build on this champion. Ori doesn't exactly have the luxury of having massive scalings or base damages. You do typically have to be very efficient about how you want to do damage. Rozu's the sole AP in this game. I guess he sees again, oh, it's a low range team composition. Maybe pinning someone in place helps a little bit more, but I really think something like a Leandros or a Ludens would have gone very much in keeping with this composition so far. Nor do I see any Dark Seal for those stacks. Ooh. He's not at this play either way, though. Venza just getting shut out.
Yeah, no, that's over-aggressive. That's, it's not level 3 on the Samira, but it feels very similar. Overstepping his bounds, and now that's giving Astralis priority. They can get some damage down onto this mid lane tower. They secured this second Herald. They have got 100% of the Herald so far in this series, and they're doing pretty good in game 2.
And though these drafts are thematically fairly similar to game 1, there are some key differences, and the way the early game has played out has meant that Astralis have much more ability to take control of this mid lane. You have suddenly this Lucian Nami, one-item spike again. We called out in the last game, though they were just a little too far behind to leverage it really to the extent they wanted to. But in this one, they are very happy with how that's going. They can take over this mid lane control, hold Venza to account, who has been playing very aggressively and has now been punished by the side of Astralis.
Yeah, and 2 towers taken to the 0 of JDXL. It becomes a hell of a lot harder to play the map, especially around the bottom half of the Rift, where this Drake is going to be spawning in a minute's time. Remember, JDXL uncontested on the Drakes in the previous game, and I imagine that Astralis are not happy with that streak continuing.
Yeah, JDXL, they had, what was it, a 9-0 first half of the split before things ended up going very difficult in summer. They had themselves a huge win streak either way. I actually can't remember the exact number. Very large.
Large.
But Astralis really not content to have JDXL matching up to that sort of record again. Of course, with, 6-0 groups through their quarterfinals as well. JDXL actually probably have surpassed that at this point. JDXL are going to have to fight very hard at this point now. As we said, it's not easy for them to play this style of composition from behind. Leads tend to stick, and Astralis have a much better footing in this game to really start off these fights. Herald's put down, Dan taking a bit of a chunk, and...
Oh, teleport!
FTG
diving forward, a double stun, a shutdown on to Chrisberg. Cries now getting the flawless duet there, but Senko's level 11 on the Swain. A lot of healing goes into the Zhonya's to buy a little bit more time and forcing JDXL to disengage. Carlson now mega on the Gnar, but can't quite find an ult.
FGG, Hex Flash ready, waiting over the wall, looking to see what's going to happen with this Mega Gnar. JDXL choose not to commit to that fight any further. Carlson now out of Mega Gnar, but JDXL have the man advantage.
Look how low Venza is. Carlson picks him up with ease. 80 carries off the board for both of these teams. Flash forced out of the Gnar as FGG a little bit isolated on the bottom half of this fight. Being dueled up with Taxa, who can take him incredibly low and will take him out. Resets, turns into the Rel, and now JDXL are forced to run for the hills.
That's a pretty painful overstep there from Venza. And Venza, look, we know how this player plays. He plays close to the edge, and it bites him a fair amount, especially when he doesn't have these dominant advantages. Saw how that worked out in game 1. See how it punishes him in this second game. Astralis, they fight back from a man disadvantage through Senkox's Swain. This is one of the big draft adaptations which Astralis brought into this second game. The Akali did a lot of work in that first game, but it really is the Swain diff in this one, controlling the area, making sure that JDXL really can't get these clean kills, especially through that stopwatch running. Going to go back to a replay of how this happened. It was, of course, the Herald put down. One of the big ways you can respond to a Herald is just by instantly all-inning. That's what JDXL do. They commit their flash, but as soon as this ult comes in from Senkox, look at the amount of healing, look at the amount of damage. You just have to disengage.
There's nothing that you can do. And I mean, credit to Astralis. They play with patience here, right? They wait for Venza and FGG to make these oversteps, to make these mistakes, and they punish appropriately.
And then Venza sat around on the 3rd HP, just gets hit by the boulder. And, Carlson, Mini-Gnar is effectively an AD carry. It is a marksman at that point, and Venza not able to stand up to the damage. Didn't have the shield bow up and available for the last bit of that one. And Astralis take the freebie, take a dragon afterwards, and now suddenly at a point where it is again Astralis, minor lead. Carlson, not in the place where he wants to be, though.
Yeah, minor mistake there, as in the meanwhile for me, is going to be able to run himself away. Dan, though, with the True Grit, can chase him down, and that's a shutdown secured for Cries. That's massive. Gold in Irelia is a bad place for the gold to be if you're an Astralis fan.
Especially when this Aurelia wants to be much like the Aatrox in that first game, controlling side lanes and then turning up to the fight. That was one of the key pivotal things that JDXL did in the mid game of game 1. They controlled those side lanes and collapsed in. And I think that's one thing which JDXL have very much learned over the course of Aurora Cup, and ever since kind of the end of Summer, they've really started to find ways to play out that mid game, which they did kind of struggle with after their roster change and their collapse through the second split of 2022. Cries getting that advantage, very important if they want to mount themselves. I'm not going to say a comeback. I don't think it's that big of enough of a lead at this point, but again, get themselves into stronger footing in this game.
I think it has been very, very nice to see from this series so far that it's back and forth. Even when JDXL were in that massive gold lead in game 1, Astralis were able to cut that significantly with the way that they are playing these fights. And Dan, a little bit of a rough spot here if Taxa opts to go for him. Spectrumore not securing the stun onto the JDXL jungler. A lot of tension in this mid game. Both teams so even.
Yeah, it does feel as though game 1 was a little bit more hairpin turns, a little harder to recover from mistakes when they happen. This game, it has had a bit more back and forth. Actually, I think a lot of that is because, particularly because of Kiba inside of Astralis. Because you look at this Nami, the amount of bubbles which have stopped these aggressive plays coming in, they've been much more impactful in this game than they were in that last one. Kiba, remember in that first game, very much getting picked off across the board, but has meant that we've been neutralizing a little bit more, been dancing back and forth a bit more. FGG looking to push the advantage.
It's mid lane tower, it's FGG diving, of course he is. 2 kills already for JDXL, but look at Senkux, the healing, the zone control that this Swain offers, completely turning the play around. That's 2 for Astralis in reply.
Oh, Senkux's Swain. We had a fair amount to say about Senkux and the leads he was building up and wanting to see him on another champion which can really leverage them. And this Swain has ticked all of the boxes. Astralis, they once again call back onto JDXL and say, all right, you're going to engage. What happens when you don't deal with the Swain, though? The answer is you lose the fight afterwards.
Incredibly difficult to touch him. No kills yet, but I think MVP in a lot of these fights so far. And JDXL now, they're coming into this portion of the game, into this sort of mid-game without a gold lead, without the ability to just stat check to a certain event on certain champions. But Astralis, they've got carries enabled. Taxa, 3-0-3. That Blade of the Ruin King is going to be coming in incredibly soon for the Viego.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you mentioned Taxa, because that's the other part of the mid-jungle duo. We've talked about Senkux, his Akali, and his Swain, of course, been highlights of Astralis's first 2 games. But Taxa's Viego, we saw it so much throughout this year, and he has been in typically the right place at the right time. Actually, he has been making sure that it's not clean victories for JDXL when they have been finding them, and this Viego is a win condition. 2 items. Yeah, has the ability to burst out the first target, but those resets become more and more scary as the game goes on. We even saw that earlier into that first game. Speaking of Taxa, going to be walking up towards this river as well. Dragon in half a minute, looking for this mid lane priority. Again, Chrisberg, 2.5 items. Very dangerous on this Lucian. Not to mention everyone else. It's an arm wrestle for these minions yet again.
Yeah, and it's an arm wrestle that is being won by Astralis as they can get a small cheat into the mid lane. Cries in a bush away from Vision as Chrisberg pulls out the culling, does about 40% of Venza's HP, but
that's enough. That's enough, because if Swain gets on top of Venza now, you don't have the ability to keep that alive. You don't have the enchanter, you don't have the heals, you don't have a heal on your team. That chunk onto Venza, very important, but JDXL, get him access to a couple more minions, get a little bit of that lifesteal through. The battle's not just done yet. Cries on the flank, has flash, has ult.
Waiting in the wings. Not pulling it. This isn't a dragon that you need to die over. It's second Drake for both of these teams. It's not the end of the world if you give this one up, but they've both been so willing to fight, so willing to contest each other in this series so far. JDXL moving in.
FGG on the flank, has an angle, has a Hex Flash. Does he have the mark?
He's going after Kiba and Senkux. Astralis are able to take down the Baron, but look at Senkux, he's fine. The Swain is unkillable in these fights, and Taxa is on a rampage, flashing forward, chasing down Cries and co. A double kill for the Viego, and the Irelia in a pretty rough situation as well. The Spectrumore going forward, the Nevermood not connecting either of them. JDXL, they lose 2, they get away with the rest of their lives.
Oh, JDXL, they lose control of the river. They don't quite manage to find the multi-man wombo that they want. And without Venzo, without FGG, you have to imagine this is Baron. You don't have Flash or ult on the Aurelia. You're looking for a steal and a dream from Dan.
Oh, we've seen a fair few Baron steals over the past 48 hours, Nightmare. Dan maybe looking to replicate a few of those. Still has the flash, still has the dash available, but no vision in the pit. Carlson going over the wall to deny the play, and that is a Baron for Astralis.
There we go, it's hard fought. It's definitely hard fought, but Astralis, very disciplined about the way that they've approached mid waves. Go get that priority, move over to the objective, make sure that you're playing on the disengage. You're not over-engaging into JDXL. And they find themselves advantages through that. They managed to catch JDXL on the engage, exhaust put in from Senkux, and that is enough to win that fight. Now with the Baron buff involved, they can start winning through these side lanes, start pushing in these waves with even more fervor and taking control of the map and all the gold that comes with it.
And credit to them, actually. That was a rough game one to lose. You were coming back into it, it felt like in the mid game, but then one explosive fight just brings it all the way back in JDXL's favor. They've shown that discipline, they've shown that poise that maybe they were lacking a little bit, and they've put themselves in a situation where JDXL could be staring down their first defeat of the tournament.
Yeah, it's been quite a while since they've seen that loss screen. They have, of course, some chances to see that off. There's every chance that you manage to catch someone out of position, but Astralis, it's much harder to, again, punish those mistakes than in that first game. Every time you're looking to really press the advantage, someone like Senkux pops the ult, flies into your backline, Leandries applies, stops you chasing down the targets that you want, Meganar disrupts things, and Kiba and Chrisberg being so much more of a factor in this game. Of course, that duo very slippery, very hard to get on top of. JDXL, they're starting to run out of options, nor do they have the vision control on this top side to really find isolated members at this point. You do have FGG's flash though, flash and a dream from FGG. They couldn't get the steal earlier, but the dream is alive in that Iron Horse. FGG, eyes on that rel.
Rise has teleport as he's pushing in the bot lane, but a real deep wards that he can move towards, so Astralis a bit freer to push in the top side. Still have the Baron for a minute, already 30% HP off this tower.
Okay, so Kryze is pushing this bot side, has the teleport. No one is responding to them right now. This is going to be an inner turret taken down. You're going to be trading for at least the inhibitor turret, but Astralis, can they find themselves enough victories to force Kryze to teleport back?
Potentially never move thrown out, going a little wide there. And JDXL, they seem content to give up this inhibitor. They don't think that they can contest, and
yeah, Carson's backed at this point. So at least you've got yourself a momentary numbers advantage, but Astralis, they are in coordination with one another. They're backing off in the top side of the map as Carson goes to retreat on that bot side. They take themselves the inhibitor, and they defend their own inhibitor on that bot side. They walk away with a victory. It is a trade, and I think JDXL are willing to take that one at that point, but Astralis still coming out better for wear.
So, Nightmare, I want to do a little bit of learning right now.
Okay. Good luck with that. How can I help?
I've been told the conventional wisdom is that when you take an inhib, the ideal situation is you want to take the inhib opposite the side of the next objective that's spawning, because you've got that wave of super minions that can apply pressure for free, and that frees up for you to move towards that objective. Dragon is spawning in a minute's time. This will be sole point for Astralis. Are they feeling happy about taking that inhib?
I hate to point this out, Middlecop, but I think you've done the learning already, and I think you're just showing off. Because yes, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Because typically you're there and you're like, okay, super minions force someone to respond, and then you have them on that side of the map, not in prime position to really affect the fight very early on. Particularly when you have champions like, I guess something like a Cannon is a really good example of this, that wants to teleport in early to make sure that they can really impact the fight before it's already done, before your AD carry's dead, before the engage has already happened. But as it stands right now, Kryze is actually not answering that top side. JDXL, I think they're playing on a short timer. They're saying, look, we've got like a minute maybe until these minions, 30 seconds even, start crashing in towards our Nexus turrets. We can play around that timer. But Astralis, even with the Dragon coming up, pushing in that mid lane again, taking a chunk and never move!
Ooh, FGG is alive, but he's not going to be able to contribute to the fight. Kryze taken low. That's a load with the ultimate, but stunned up himself, thrown into that little bit of terrain and taken out. Astralis doesn't look like they care about the Drake right now. They want this second inhib of the game.
Astralis, they bet that they can find something in that mid lane. They can find themselves a pick before the Dragon comes up, and they're rewarded for their boldness. They hit the skill shots. That culling, 3 items on the Lucian, absolutely shreds FGG, who can't be that Miracle Engage in the way that we seen from this champion over the seasons has been in pro play. Astralis take their well-earned dragon, get themselves to soul point. They take themselves a second inhibitor. They're going to reset, get that gold spent. JDXL, they have not been given easy engage options.
And that's the key thing. In the first game, JDXL got their advantages by going for these dives, by going for these plays, taking people off the rift, and then going for objectives. Astralis, they've been a lot more calm. They've been a lot more patient, poking people out, and then moving in to take what they want.
Yeah, so again, you look at FGG and you understand the thought process, right? Because you have to look for a play. You have to. You're the rel. You are the primary engage. Maybe at this point you can't position that aggressively. I think with the flash just coming up, maybe you could have waited a couple of seconds. If they were planning to engage as the tower fell, of course, that's your timing. But FGG kind of loses out in the mind game to the ranks of Astralis, who just pile on all that damage and stop them from really finding the engage they needed.
But then if you are JDXL and FGG can't find these engages, how do you actually make it happen? Is it an Everfrost Ari dashing in, securing a charm, maybe?
Well, that's what you've got. I will actually praise this bit of itemization from Roscoe. This is something which, again, on champions which don't have the luxury of just overdoing their damage and you think, oh, you know, I'll just complete this item. I don't need to think about efficiency too much. Sitting on stopwatch as opposed to completing your Zhonya's, it saves you about 2,000 gold. Now, that 2,000 gold has built Morozku, a needlessly large rod, and then the Oblivion Orb. Now, no one else on the team is building any Grievous Wounds besides the Ignite on FGG. That's something which you can spend that extra gold on, the needlessly large rod, just to get Morozku that extra bit of damage. It does mean you only get it for one play, though. If it is going to be Ari making that play, maybe getting that burst damage onto someone like Chrisberg, you've got to do it in that one play. Well, that Zhonya's is still, that Zhonya's active. That stasis is still around. Will it be at this Baron? It is getting shredded, but not in a time scale where JDXL can't respond.
Elson looking for a flank, though, on the Gnar is around about half rages. Venza once again being caught out. FGG actually falling down. And Venza gets knocked into the wall. A shutdown for Carlson. 2 kills and Senkuts going absolutely ridiculous in the backline. There is nothing that JDXL can do to stop the Swain. The Astralis take over the fight. Kryze is left alive, but the Nexus will die in just a moment.
Senkuts takes wing, and under those dark wings do Astralis shred, butcher JDXL. They will find their first loss of the Aurora Open.
And we have got a series on our hands, Nightmare. It's a little bit cliche, but bangers have been seen across the rift.
So we are going to see at least another 2 games. It's going to go into at least 4. And the adaptations in draft and the adaptations in play from Astralis cannot be understated. If you're going to play towards low-range carries, you've got a Samira, you've got a Rel, you've got yourselves a melee top laner. Yeah, slam in that Swain. You can see exactly what it does, particularly with a player like Senkux, who has been getting his own advantages and has found a pick which can really leverage them. So JDXL, she's on the other foot now. You have to adapt.
That is going to be the call, as the Analyst Desk maybe going to be breaking down how they need to adapt, as they are going to be taking a look at that last game.
Well, the answer, middle card, is quite easy. Don't pick Ari. She's not a good champion. Let's talk about the game itself.
She is,
and what
but
we
I think he built it wrong. There was no Putrefier.
Exactly that. No Russian.
Because, you know, Swain heals a lot. And, yeah. But all jokes aside, I feel like that was... I'll take it back to what Jamada said on the draft. He's like, this is the same Astralis draft. And I added, but better. Because this draft can team fight. This draft, they saw XL playing with a very short range comp. In game number 1, they're like, if they're going to run back the exact same comp with short range carries, no consistent damage coming in from any sort of long range carry, then we're going to slam in that Swain, slow everyone who comes into proximity, have heavy engage with the Mega now, and then keep our carry safe. I think that was such a good adaptation to what XL brought in. And again, I feel like it is a slap on the wrist, running back the exact same draft from game 1. I don't think the Iron necessarily added anything into this. If anything, it subtracted from what Silas brings into the late game as a carry. You're very early prone. You have burst damage. You don't have consistent damage anymore. So you need to get ahead. And that didn't happen.
So no lane fell behind for Astralis, and then you put in Senkux in the equation with that Swain and Jamada. How can you even get closer to any sort of team fight?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of as Trouble said, it was just a better version of their game on draft, just with team fighting tools, right? I think it was a super good read from Astralis to just kind of recognize if they can survive the initial dive and burst damage of the composition that was put forward by JDXL. Swinge takes over the fight. All of that burst damage, as soon as it's expended, is a shotgun combo, essentially, right? I mean, they have a Graves, but as soon as that burst is
No pun
gone,
intended.
no pun intended. As soon as that burst is gone, that's it. Senkox is free to do what you wanted, and you really got to see it in those latter team fights. But I think especially that first big team fight where I believe it was towards the mid lane around the second-ish dragon where Senkox turned up late. It was JDXL that found the pick first, and you think, okay, they've got the tempo, they can move and do whatever they want now with this dragon fight. But Senkox just goes in to the middle of about 4 people, stopwatches, and just again that space bought and the health bars chunked out is enough to then start to provide a bit of a advantage for them to work off. So I think Astralis was just a really good read, and at this point now it's about finding the answer to the Swain, and whether or not the answer is a champion or just flat out banning it if you want to continue to play this style of hyper aggression and dive.
Because for instance, Trouble, you were talking to me about this. Like they can't even get close. They can't even ward.
I mean, the thing is, FTG is playing way too far away from his team, but there is no follow-up. Usually, you would start this fight maybe with a charm from Roscu, but he cannot walk anywhere near. Even the Lucian stepping forward can chuck down the arrow. You can dodge the taunt. And as Jamata said, all you have is burst. That Aurelia never took off. Your only consistent good damage in your team is the Graves, and you can't walk into a Swain ult when he has realized he's gonna slow you. You're gonna be perma CC'd, and you're never gonna get out alive. And I feel like the Swain is a problem. The fact that how Astralis found a way to unlock their bot lane with the Herald. So the Herald usage this time from Astralis was not to unlock Senkax from mid lane, but was to take Grispec and Kiba out of bot. Get them out before they get dived, use that mid-game spike from the Lucian together with the Nami, allow the Nami to be roaming around with Viego, which, by the way, Taxa was mega in this entire game. He was like 1 or 2 levels behind, but he was up at least 1,000 gold every single time we saw him playing into XL. And I feel like these are 2 big key question marks right here. Can you afford giving Viego over and over again? Astralis have found how to unlock your bot lane, their bot lane rather, and get them onto the map faster. And 3, what do you do about the Swain?
Astralis is not done with this fight yet. Both teams are looking for the semifinals. But before we talk what could happen on the next champion select for the 3rd game, let's toss it to a break before we come back.